To recover the mystic in everybody is to wake a culture and a religion up. Carl Jung says, only the mystic brings what's creative to religion itself. So if you're going to renew Christianity, renew religion of any kind, I think everyone agree that it needs it today. We got to put mysticism forward.
You don't know me, not yet. I'm the filmmaker here. I was traveling through Europe after a summer art program in Italy. It was 1983. All I had was a few dollars, a sketchbook, and a journal. Compared to my college hometown of Boulder, Colorado, Spain was awakening after decades of Franco's repressive rule. As I wandered in Barcelona's Las Rambla alleyways, where a young Pablo Picasso once lived, I felt a seductive promise whirling around me, like the Greek muses, enticing me to cross their threshold, to truly acknowledge the creative force within me. But what future ordeals lay ahead? What if I just kept moving and refused to acknowledge their call? My body and mind felt disconnected. More questions than answers popped up. Did my existence matter? Did I have a spiritual purpose? How would I make a living after college with a degree in fine arts? Everything simmered in that summer heat, a panic attack of sorts, which I later learned was consistent with an existential crisis. While I would like to say that I walked into a church and was comforted by St. Hildegard of Bingen, who is the subject of this film, that occurrence wouldn't happen until years later. I discovered the revolutionary call to action I had previously heard was a woman from the 12th century, a saint, whose influences in music, medicine, art, and theology are still being felt today. She had called to me like she has called to the people you're about to meet. St. Hildegard of Bingen was an unruly and revolutionary mystic whose spirit still lives within each of us, ready to awaken to our own potential.
Hildegard was a nun of the 12th century, and she lived in some ways a usual life that a nun would live within a monastery, focused on the divine liturgy, focused on holy work, as they would call it, the work of God.
The two main points of the Benedictine rule, prayers and work, they did not change since Hildegard. And this is also characteristic for our life here, so we have to earn the money for our life and all things here, the house and so on, by our own hands, as it's said in the rule of St. Benedict.
Hildegard was the 10th child of Hildebert and Mechthild, and she was, you can sort of think of it as she was offered as a tithe to the monastery.
Hildegard was born in 1098 in Bermersheim, on the other side of the Rhine, as the 10th child in her family. Her parents were noblemen, and with 14 years she came to the Disi-Bodenberg.
And remember that marriage was arranged for political reasons, and maybe Hildegard wouldn't have been, well, seemed like she might not have been a great obedient wife because she had a lot of character, personality, and intelligence, and that was obvious right away.
And she was given into the care of a woman named Judah of Sponheim, who was an anchoress in that monastery. And that means a woman who would have been enclosed in an area for a life of prayer and reflection.
And there's controversy about how healthy Jutta was.
After Jutta died, it was like she blossomed, and she did do things in a different way.
And my interpretation has always been, look, this woman was her mentor. And obviously Hildegard had a great mentor because she learned a lot about music, and of course a lot about study and reading and writing and painting. So all those, it seems to me, all those skills and arts were passed on to her by someone as a child, and Jutta was her mentor.
Oddly enough, Hildegard doesn't mention Jutta very much in her writings, and Jutta had this very ascetic, strict observance of the Benedictine rule that Hildegard, when she eventually takes control, does not necessarily follow. Hildegard is much more moderate in her interpretation of the rule, and I wonder if that in itself can tell us that Hildegard was actually rather overwhelmed and disenchanted with it when she was a young girl. Jutta's own interpretation of it was, I can imagine, too strict in some ways for Hildegard.
I'm really glad that Hildegard didn't have the same kind of spirituality that Jutta did. I don't get into the flagellation and the beating of the body, because to me, and I think to Hildegard, from what we know about her and how she adorned her sisters, the body was the temple of the divine, and you don't beat that up. Because for me, to live in the cloister meant that I was truly the bride of Christ. And I would never leave there. And I could be in communion through meditation and prayer and deeply intimate with the Christ energy.
To compose 77 songs, to produce the first morality play, to write 9 books, to found 2 monasteries, to have a healing ministry, to write books on herbs and stones, and to heal people with the right foods and understand the mysteries of the animal kingdom. It just blows your mind. And so yes, she was the saint of creativity for sure.
To be a superstar in the Middle Ages meant to excel in holiness. And yes, she was. She was recognized by people not just in Germany, but all over Europe as a very special person, a superstar, if you will. People wrote to her, they came to her. Once her fame was established, she had many visitors. She received letters from many places. So when we think about what her monastery would have been like, we need to remember there was a lot of activity.
It says all of creation is a symphony of joy and jubilation. And when Hildegard was a little girl, she had visions. And this, of course, was one of her visions, which she didn't reveal until her midlife.
She heard a voice telling her to write down all she heard and saw.
She heard the voice of the living light calling her to preach.
And I remember the day in my kitchen when this awareness was really coming to my consciousness, and I sat down and I said a quick prayer. Please take this away from me. I don't want to do this, it's too scary, and please take this away so that I can just be like I was before.
Just totally shook her by the strength of it, because God told her to speak and write what she heard and what she saw.
She was really bedridden half the time. She was in a lot of pain.
Kept it in for a while, then she discussed it with her secretary and mentor, who went to the abbot and said, listen, abbot, Hildegard had this vision, and she's very convinced that God is telling her to speak and write, and I believe her.
So she went off to preach in public, not just to priests and monks, nuns, but she spoke in public, in cathedrals and public squares.
And at the same time, she showed tremendous courage for somebody who was that sick, to go out to face whole armies of people, because as you know, she preached to armies, not only to lay people wherever she was, and she made them come to their senses and come to a higher dimension in life. I think that was what she was very, very good at.
And of course, we all know there's no turning back. And once the opening begins, it just continues to unfold. And so Hildegard was so important to me, because I think from her I gained courage, I gained that inner strength.
Right, well, the rebellious mystic. But the prophet, therefore, as Eshel says, the prophet interferes. And William Hawking says that the prophet is a mystic in action. So you get the energy and the passion from the mysticism, but then you carry it into cultural criticism and offering of cultural alternatives, and that's where the static happens. That's where you come up against institutions and those who are profiting from them, and you have to speak truth to power. And she did that in her day, and the amazing thing is she got away with it, which was unique for a woman in her time, and indeed it would have been for a man too.
And that sense of being called in all those in various ways, one of them being to interpret the scriptures, that's part of the 1141 vision also, moved her to keep writing.
So she started to write her big works, the Scivias, between 1141 and 1150, and the Liber Vitae Meritorum in the 1150s, and the Liber Divinorum Operum in the 1160s.
It also moved her to keep studying. She devised what we might think of as her own program for continuing education.
She wrote 2 works on what we call nowadays medicine, but it's not really about medicine because she compiled the knowledge of her time concerning herbs and such things. And it is a difficult thing because you cannot divide it from the Creator, from God. And if you do that, then it goes in the esoteric way and something like that. And this is not what we want to do in our shop. So we have just some herbs or something, but not what other people would like us to have. So.
She wrote her books through visions, through inspiration. She didn't do research on that. It's impossible because she had only 2 years in her life to write the medicinal books. So, and it's about 2,000 remedies. So how can you make research on people with 2,000 drugs? So it was inspired. She, for example, she took the stone in her hand and says, what's with the chalcedony? What kind of healing forces are in there? And she got that idea inspired or in vision and dictated that to a monk because she was not able to write herself.
I believe that Hildegard was not just a personal one-on-one healer, but she was a societal healer. And I believe that she actually looked at some of the structures of our society and tried to bring about change. And she had many men at that time very much respected her because she spoke from and she wrote from such a place of inner authority that came from her mystical relationship with creation.
In the Physicas are 9 volumes. Here is the remedies of the spices. She has about 350 spices and herbs. She has trees, she has 55 trees. She has precious stones, 24 precious stones. She has the fish, the healing forces in fish, in animals, in reptiles, in metals, and even in the 4 elements. She can heal with fire, with breathing, and with water, and with herbs.
She felt a connection to stones and knew that stones have a healing power too. So it's all these things in creation that by opening ourselves up to them in a mystical way, we can become healers of ourselves. So she didn't actually heal people. She opened up a space in their spirit where they could heal themselves through a relationship with the plant world and with stones.
So we have more of her intellectual contributions to her culture than we do for any woman from the Middle Ages. And I think if she were a man, she would be recognized perhaps as one of the greatest figures of the Middle Ages.
Hildegard had a sense of being human that never departed from her. And for her, the human was beautiful.
she really believed that being made in the image of God meant that we too are creators. And so we sort of have a responsibility to create, to add to that which is good, you know. God said, you know, let there be light, and there was light and it was good. And so that's part of our divinity, is to create goodness and beauty.
God loves man, and his love flows over the world, which she says in one of her songs, Caritas Abundat. And this is also a very important point people have to know nowadays.
I think she opened up people's hearts, not their minds, but their hearts, to having this relationship with Jesus, with creation, through prayer.
That God wants to be in relation with man. And that's why he created the world where we live. And because Adam and Eve did not work so good at the beginning, he tried to come into relation with human beings again by sending his son in the world. And this is the important message, which also is nowadays an important message still.
I think theologically it all boils down to her theology of the Holy Spirit. Now, this is echoed in other creation-centered mystics such as Thomas Aquinas and Meister Eckhart. Aquinas says the same spirit that hovered over the waters at the beginning of creation hovers over the mind of the artist at work. In other words, creation is still going on, and in a special way in human imagination. And Hildegard says that too in her own words.
You may wonder how I became attached to making this film. Letting go of a fast filmmaking festival that had run for 9 years helped to create the new opportunity of time. I also wanted to spread the creativity and inspiration I saw occurring in our community to a wider audience. It was time to put my energies into doing something even bigger. There is a synchronicity at play when one door closes and another door opens. Instead of going to the beach in Mexico for spring break, I went on a pilgrimage to the Rhineland with spiritual directors, pastors, ministers, and educators. I was the most lay person.
What I have found is that people who really want to make changes in their life will seek out spiritual direction. People that are stuck and they don't know why they're stuck. People who are ready to embark on something life-changing. And what they really need is a spiritual director. They need someone to walk beside them. They need someone to journey with them. They need someone to pilgrim with them. And all of life is a pilgrimage. And here we are in Germany on a pilgrimage, learning more about Hildegard of Bingen, learning about how she was a spiritual director, learning how she valued spiritual direction. And that's another thing. No spiritual director, in my book, has the right to be a spiritual director if they don't have a spiritual director, because we're all on the journey, and none of us has ever arrived.
It was billed as a rebirthing retreat, timed to coincide with spring equinox. As I walked the grounds of Dizzy Botenberg, the hilltop sanctuary of Hildegard's first abbey, above 2 rivers, there was a thin veil of past and present. The place felt holy. It is a place to explore alone, but I never felt alone. You could almost hear the singing of Hildegard's nuns amongst the trees on that cold March day.
This incredibly beautiful music that had been written by this woman who had lived in the 1100s. And I was just mesmerized.
Hildegard's music was not easy. If anyone who wants to approach Hildegard's songs has to be serious about it. It's not something that you do lightly, because it's so demanding vocally. It's demanding with the breath. The phrases are very long. The range of the song, how many notes it encompasses. An octave and a half, 2 octaves. There are even a couple of songs that have 2.5 octave ranges, which is extreme for music. In our day, we don't even have most music like that.
Die Grundlagen von Hildegards Musik sind eigentlich so früh, dass es in dieser Zeit ganz wenig Forschung gibt. Es gibt sogar Musikwissenschaftler, die Hildegard als eine Fiktion bezeichnet hatten, dass es sie gar nicht gegeben hat, was ich nicht glaube. Und es ist einfach so, dass es gibt eben keinerlei Überlieferung, wie die Musik geklungen hat. Niemand weiß, wie sie wirklich aufgeführt wurde. Niemand weiß, wo sie aufgeführt wurde. Aber ich denke, dass in der damaligen Zeit es ist ja aufgeführt worden, offenbar, obwohl es auch dafür keine Zeugnisse gibt, keine genauen. Und ich denke, das, was sie komponiert hat, ich gehe davon aus, dass ein Komponist, der heute lebt in einer Umwelt, die er auf das Papier bringt. Und eine Komponistin wie Hildegard hat sehr viel früher gelebt, aber hat auch ihr Leben im Kloster, ihre Gedanken in diese Partitur reingebracht.
And as far as we know, Hildegard's music is the earliest music that we know for sure was written by a woman.
She heard her songs in her own spirit, and those songs, she said, were from her visionary work. She would hear the music, she would hear the words, and then she would put it together and sing it, probably. She probably sang it as she composed, and I'm very familiar with this kind of composing because my own mother was a very accomplished church organist and composer, and she would just say, well, I just hear it in my spirit, and then I write it down. God dictates it to me and I write it down. And I can hear Hildegard saying that.
Carl Jung says it's to the mystics there belongs what is best in humanity. So it's not just about religion, but it's about humanity itself getting on its feet and being itself, its better self, its authentic self. For that too, the mystics lead the way because they're at the edge of human consciousness. And they're wrestling with the extremes, whether it's wrestling with the extremes of evil or the extremes of ecstasy and of creativity. They have so much to say. Hildegard is a good example.
She had this concept called viriditas, which is the greening power in all of creation that makes sense more and more as we come to know more about ecology and environmental issues.
Got real in touch with the greening, wore green almost all the time, wore a lot of green dresses, skirts, got into wearing long skirts a lot and a lot of green because there was something about the flowing of the green.
Benedictus
So music was for Hildegard her primary mode of praising God, of worshiping God, and of ministering to God and ministering to his people through music. So the music that she wrote was intended for the offices, intended for these different services throughout the day in the monastery, and they had specific uses.
For me, the arts are sacred. And so for me to preach a sermon and include something artistic while I'm preaching, even dancing or singing or a poem, or to do something separate, outside of the building of a church that's artistic, because everything that I do is it's divine anyway. And I didn't get that message for myself. I got that message from God one day when I was literally told, all music is my music, or all the music that you will write is my music, whether it's an R&B song or a jazz tune or a classical piece or a theater piece. It's all God's music. So I don't separate those anymore.
The radiance of the music is remarkable. It is like the light on the water. It has a great freedom to it. It's ecstatic. And what a thing to bring into the darkness.
And she was the first producer ever of a morality play. Her morality play on the virtues of God. And her nuns would sing this. And there was one non-singing role in the whole play, and that was the role of the devil, which she cast her priest in because he had a nice deep voice and he didn't get to sing in this play. Her purpose being that the devil doesn't sing, because the devil lost, Satan lost his first estate when he fell from heaven. When he tried to put himself higher than God, he fell, and then he couldn't sing anymore. So he's been trying to corrupt our music ever since.
Soul music has a lot of riffs too, and if you slow it down, it almost sounds like Hildegard's music. And the purpose of the riffs was to clean out your soul, and the purpose of those riffs back then was to dig around in your soul too, so it's all the same thing.
Sie hat Medizin gemacht, sie hat Ernährungskunde gemacht, sie hat Philosophie gemacht, sie war Äbtissin, alles. Sie hat so viel gemacht und ist dadurch, glaube ich, fast weltweit in eine ganz bestimmte Richtung genommen worden und vereinnahmt worden, was ich nicht gut finde. Ich denke, sie hat so einen ungeheuren Wert als Komponistin auch gehabt. Und um diesen Wert wieder richtig zu würdigen, deshalb habe ich dieses Stück genommen und habe es wirklich über die Jahre hinweg ausgearbeitet, immer wieder verändert, immer wieder neu gemacht. Und deshalb war es jetzt auch so, dass ich damit eine wunderbare CD-Produktion machen konnte, worüber ich sehr glücklich bin, weil damit kann man, ich will mal sagen, sie als eine andersdenkende Frau schon zu ihrer Zeit auch hinstellen. Und diese Vereinnahmung von diesen verschiedenen Richtungen, die finde ich persönlich einfach nicht sehr gut, weil ich finde, wenn man eine historische Persönlichkeit nimmt und sie sich zu eigen macht und sagt, die gehört mir, die gehört uns, die gehört der Medizin, die gehört dorthin, das finde ich nicht gut, weil ich finde, ein Mensch hat auch, wenn er nicht mehr lebt, ein Recht zu leben, im Geist, mit seiner Arbeit. Und das war eigentlich die Idee von uns, Hildegard da zum Leben zu rufen, weil es war einfach eine ungeheure Frau.
In some religious practices, a relic usually consists of the physical remains of a saint or venerated person preserved for the purposes of veneration as a tangible memorial. The first time I encountered the reliquary of St. Hildegard, there was no denying that sweetness, like a flower to a bee. Our group, having been invited by the nun to make an offering of song, did so, and having not practiced myself, I found myself singing in perfect harmony as tears streamed down my face. I was not alone.
Deine seiner Klarheit erkennen. Darum bitten wir durch Jesus Christus, deinen Sohn, unseren Herrn und Gott, der in der Einheit des Heiligen Geistes mit dir lebt und herrscht in alle Ewigkeit. Amen.
When I returned 6 months later, it was her first official feast day. I was walking with Saint Hildegard and part of a great wholeness that is limitless as I discovered that auspicious day. There I was with her in that brisk September air, walking together.
Some people have the wind on their back, and some people, every step they take, they have wind pushing against them in their face. And so we hear these stories, and by connecting to people through their stories of pain, through their dark night of the soul, we grow closer as a community and really create deep bonds. And so all of this, like Hildegard and her mystical way of being, is in all of this. So she created mandalas through art, and what I'm doing is creating mandalas of people. And one of her mandalas, it has angels all around the side of it. And so when I sit in circle with these men in San Quentin, we're sitting shoulder to shoulder, and I feel we are creating that mandala. We are becoming angels guiding each other in how we can really connect and interconnect to ourselves.
So she says that when humans are sinning on earth, it disturbs the heavens above. Those of us who believe in global warming, that the environment is being damaged by humanity's actions, can, I think, connect to this and see that as a sort of sin, if you will, to which the heavens are replying. I know when I've talked to people about Hildegard's views and how the heavens shake in response to what humans are doing, they immediately connect with that and say, well, of course they are. Look what's happening. The heavens are shaking and doing other things.
To be a doctor of the church means you are an intellectual. You have intellectual prowess. Other doctors of the church would be John Duns Scotus, who's a 14th century theologian who wrote great lengthy treatises on disputed questions of deep intellectual work. Bonaventure, the seraphic doctor, and Thomas Aquinas are other examples of doctors in the church. There are very few women doctors in the church, and for Hildegard to be named one of them is to speak to her intellectual prowess and her ability as a theologian, her theological acumen, and her she's on par with Aquinas, is what that means.
You cannot have a Nobel Prize than being the doctor of the church throughout the world. Yeah.
The study of God does not necessarily have to be divorced from the study of science or the study of art or the study of music. It's something that floods through all of life. As a theologian, she saw it as her duty to understand life through the lens of her visions and of scripture. And that did not necessarily divorce itself from scientific pursuit. Although the 21st century would certainly look at Hildegard's writings on medicine and probably scoff at them, the fact of the matter is that it was science in her day that she was engaging, and engaging quite well, which is an important lesson for any contemporary theologian, I think.
I'm a trained naturalist. I'm Naturwissenschaftler, which is a PhD. I was trained at the Technical University in Berlin, and thereafter I went to Yale University as a postdoc, and then I worked 13 years in the pharmaceutical industry. I did everything you can do, from research to clinical research, to try out the first time drugs with patients. And after the end of my career in the pharmaceutical industry, I saw all you do is synthetical drugs. And I saw in the clinical trial that all those synthetic drugs have severe side effects. Even they sometimes bring that disease out which you want to prevent. So I looked more and more in nature, and I went more and more to Hildegard's medicine. And today I take Hildegard's remedy and scrutinize, and I look very scientifically into remedies and see the constituents, I see the molecules, I see what works together, and it's in harmony with our body. And this is the biggest mistake in the pharmaceutical company today, is that they don't look in nature anymore. You don't have to rediscover anything new, it's all there already. You only take it from nature, isolate it, and see what it does, and there's a lot of work to do. What I also feel, and this is very spiritual, Hildegard is the first one and the only one who has a Christian system of medicine in respect of a holistic system. She has spirituality, theology, cosmology, she has music and healing arts, and she has all in her books, in her work included. And this is our traditional healing system in the Western world.
She had gardens, she grew herbs. There's a whole book of herbal medicine that she developed. Natural healing. She's one of our first, an ancient natural healer.
And many of Hildegard's practices of using an egg for healing, of using herbs, of using stones, those are in the curandera tradition. And what a curandero or curandera does for someone is they might be called a healer, but actually what they're doing is they are inspiring the healing energy within you. And they are connecting you to the healing graces of the plant world. And they kind of, they will pray with you and try to open your heart, expand your heart. So that way, if you do something like eat this basil, I am taking in basil, and basil is becoming a part of me. And basil is the herb of love and abundance. So as I eat basil, or I can make a tea with it and drink it, or I can make a bigger pot of it and take a bath with it, with the water, then this, the energy and grace of basil is then within me. So it's kind of a communion. I am becoming basil, and basil is becoming me.
When I started in '84, I had about half a patient a week, because Dr. Herzka was not there. He came only occasionally. We worked together 17 years. We wrote a lot of books. So it's very slowly it increased, and I said 3 years I'm gonna make it, and then I'm gonna see how it's gone. And after 3 years, it was building up. And today I have so many patients. I wish I had more help. I wish I had anybody who could help me and do Hildegard treatment, because the patients love it dearly. I treated in the meantime 30 years about 30,000 patients. We have a garden in front of the center, and in the garden are growing our remedies. And it's a lot of fun to see how they grow throughout the year, how to harvest them, how to make an elixir, how to make a salve. So when we see a Hildegard garden, we need to have some basic remedies, like we have a quince tree. Quince, we have juice in the fall, or we have quince jam and preserve, or we have quince bread. And we need this for rheumatism, to get the uric acid Out of our body, we drink a liter or half a liter of quince juice. Next tree we need in a Hildegard garden is a chestnut tree. The chestnut looks like a little brain. It has the same curves there, looks like a brain, so it has a significance to the brain. And she says, whoever has an empty brain, eat enough chestnuts and the function of your brain will be improved. And the other indication of chestnuts, which we got from Hildegard, is protecting our liver from all the toxins. Like the old French people, when they drank their red wine, they always ate marroni, chestnuts on the open fire, roasted. So the chestnuts protect the liver from the alcohol, so it doesn't get liver disease. Then we have a lot of spices and herbs. Like the most important one will be galanga, which normally grows only in tropical gardens, but we have it here on the Lake of Constance, very warm on the south end of Germany. So it grows very well. We make from galanga, we make a pill. And Dr. Herzka, when he started his office, he was also in a Sanka-wagen, in an emergency car, and he came to people who had heart attack. Normally you need nitroglycerin or you need adrenaline or something like that. And he didn't use that anymore. He was only using galanga. He put that pill on their tongue and leave it on the tongue. It's very spicy, very hard, very sharp. And immediately it opens the vessel, the heart gets a good blood supply, and the pain goes immediately away within 2 or 3 minutes. You repeat it after 5 other minutes and 5 other minutes 3 times, and you can stop a heart attack, you can stop a stroke. You can go and check up afterwards in a hospital, so we are careful, we don't want to have a risk. And they say, okay, you had a beginning of a heart attack, you had a beginning, but it didn't affect you at all. It's coming from the ginger family, so it's like a spice and has no side effects. You cannot do anything wrong with galanga. Every person on the world should have a box of galanga in his pocket, because everybody, there's no exception, gets sometimes a stroke, a little stroke, or gets a heart attack or loss of hearing. It only depends how old you are. If you're getting older, you get everything there is. We come to fennel. We see fennel, and we are using fennel tea, we are using fennel tablets, and we are using also fennel bulbs as a vegetable. Fennel is good carminativa, which means it cleanses your karma, outside and inside. It's good for digestion, takes away all the putridity. We don't need deodorant, we eat fennel, and it takes away the odor coming from your mouth or the odor coming from your skin. It's cleansing your eyes, so you could get a very good visibility. This is also one of the 100% good remedy for preventing digestion disease. Another one we have in our garden is duckweed. Duckweed is a little green plant floating on the water, and the ducks come and they eat it. This duckweed is a very good food for animals because it has a lot of proteins, and it contains a very slight radioactivity, very slightly. So this duckweed elixir is cooked with 10 other spices like ginger or cinnamon or fennel or tansy, and you take that cure during the winter time to improve your immune system. It's good for preventing flu, it's against flu, and it's especially preventing cancer and precancerosis and burnout and all kinds of weakness of your immune system. And you do that once a year, also a cure, and that takes care of preventing disease. Who wants to have cancer? Nobody wants to have cancer, but 1 person out of 3 in our society has cancer. This is ridiculous to wait till everybody has cancer, and then comes this very strong treatment with surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. The best thing is preventing, and this you can do with Hildegard remedy of duckweed elixir.
And I made a special diet because I have 40 years of migraine, suffering of migraine. And then I learned a lot about food, about the Chinese food. But then it's not our culture. Then I was looking also something in our culture. You know, it's best to eat what you are, it's what is in your surrounding, what is seasonal. And she inspired me very much to eat this healthy food and something which is really good for your body.
She says Spelt is the most important and the best grain found on earth. She even says Adam and Eve, they were eating Spelt. Because it comes from Mesopotamia, where the paradise was, and the Egypts, they were eating it, the Greeks were eating it, the Romans were eating it, and of course here the Germans were eating also Spelt for 5,000 years. And Spelt not only contains the proteins and the carbohydrates and the fatty acids and the essential vitamins and minerals, it contains one substance which we have discovered only 20 years ago. It's called rhodanite or thiocyanide. Thio means sulfur, cyanide is what you kill people with, cyanide. And this substance, if it's together with the sulfur, is completely untoxic, and it's in our tears, it's in our salvia, it's in our blood, it's in the mother milk. The mother milk is giving the baby the defense system through this thiocyanide or rhodanite. And we found out that all the healthy cells have a combination of sulfur and cyanide, untoxic. But if it goes into cancerous cells, it's falling apart in sulfur and cyanide. And the cyanide is killing the cancerous cells. So if you eat Spelt, you have a constant treatment and killing of cancerous cells in your body. Not only a roll a day, you eat it 3 times a day, you eat pasta, you eat Spätzle, you eat cookies, you eat whatever.
So oftentimes we view the Middle Ages as the Dark Ages, is the picture that we see of them as this time of great sickness, great plague. Nothing important ever happened in the Dark Ages. It's more proper to think of this time as the Middle Ages, is what people in the academy and in scholarship will call it. The term the Dark Ages is usually just thrown out.
She was an incarnation of creativity, whether it's her painting, her music, her poetry, her writings, her research, her healing. She finds so many modes, and including just her prose and her poetry itself. Her language is stunning at times. She just grabs you, as she does, of course, with her music.
After her death, all fell into darkness. Nobody touched her books. Nobody translated that in any language, till Dr. Herzka. He came 800 years later, and he got this book, and he fell in love with this book and says, oh my gosh, what's here? Here is rheumatism in, gout in, heart disease, here is cancer in.
I think this is also what drove her to the spirit, is that her body failed her in many, many ways. So she became more and more attached to the spiritual way of life.
So there's a lot of relationship between Hildegard and Ayurvedic and the Chinese. For example, Hildegard likes to cook, and all the stuff she cooks are remedies. This is what Hippocrates said already 2,000 years ago. Your food should be your remedy. And so if we cook a soup or if we make a meal with Spelt, this is already has a purpose for your health.
She felt a connection to stones and knew that stones have a healing power too. So it's all these things in creation that by opening ourselves up to them in a mystical way, we can become healers of ourselves. So she didn't actually heal people. She opened up a space in their spirit where they could heal themselves through a relationship with the plant world and with stones.
In her Physica, she includes a chapter about healing with stones, and she is providing 20 stones with all the indications, precise indication what to do. Every stone has a crystal structure, and in the crystal structure we have atoms, and the atoms are vibrating, and this energy comes out, and this is in the range of our body energy. So if we have an organ which is dysfunctional, we can recharge it with crystal energy. She never treated anybody with her remedies. She was healing with charismatic things like with water from the Rhine River, or with prayers or laying hands on. 25 of those healings are recorded, but none with her own remedies. She might have eaten Spelt, that's for sure, because wherever she goes and went at that time was Spelt available.
Hildegard, I think, has the right test, which is the test of the via transformativa. Is this creativity being put to the use of justice and compassion, or for other more dark and shadowy purposes?
Because I had lived part of my life in the convent, I connected with so much of who this Hildegard person was, even though I didn't really have a lot of facts yet. And it was more people saying to me, you know Hildegard, do you realize how much you're like Hildegard? When we read the sacred word, and it may be something from the Bible, or it may be something from poetry, it could be different things. And when we read that, then instead of preaching, what I do is I set the sacred container and I begin to ask questions so that people can begin to relate the stories of their lives and how they intertwine with the sacred story, and thus discover their own sacredness.
When you see someone who is doing what they love, you want to be a part of that. It's like invitational. And so I feel that these are things that Hildegard, that was a way she was. She was invitational.
Hildegard had a sense of being human that never departed from her.
Well, there's just so many demands on people's time. And with all of the social media and all the networking now and all of that, is there a way to balance that too with some quiet time? Because she was a very, very busy person, but she also took time to be quiet and to be reflective. So I think that's something that all of us can learn from.
She had the imagination to see that women should not be oppressed. She really saw it. It's astounding, actually.
I ran into a man at a conference who was Native American, and he came up to me and he said, I've been working in prisons for 12 years. He said, men in prison are busy projecting. So yours is the first book I've ever used in 12 years that got men to look inside and find the nobility inside. That was very moving to me, the nobility inside, that men have sacrificed. They're out of touch with their own nobility. Now, the whole culture has brought this about. The ideology and theology of original sin brings that about. Original sin cuts you off from your nobility. And I believe consumer capitalism is built on original sin ideology. It's a secular version of original sin. You don't have what it takes inside, so you got to buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this, and you can't afford any of it. And so you go around, being passive and depressed, and become a couch potato and buy more potato chips. So you can see this consciousness of isolation and of only a fewer mystics, only a fewer artists. It just builds a whole narrative of disempowerment.
Our service is very interfaith, trans-denominational is what we've been calling it, because we do pick wisdom from all the traditions and try to incorporate it into our Sunday gatherings. And we always begin Sundays with Namaste, so the divine that's present in me recognizes and honors the divine that's present in you. And we honor each other with a bow. And then we take some time for meditation and move into a reading, and then I do a sermon. And then what makes our service unique is that we do what we call a unity ceremony every Sunday, and it differs based on what the theme is. But the idea is that we have a communal experience that we share together so that after the service we can process it together. And it's hopefully a spiritual experience that triggers things, challenges people, moves people out of their comfort zone, so that there's continual growth in the community. And we challenge each other with it.
The Spirit flows through all things. It is what we tap into with what she calls greening power. And we tap into it with our imaginations and our creativity. This is why she says there's wisdom in all creative works. And obviously, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a great idea. A patron saint of the artist would be Hildegard.
It's that power of creation. We all need to think about what can we create in our world so that way we can affect profound change. And it's through doing what we love. Create what you love. And then in turn, I think that heals ourselves because it brings that very positive vibration and that very positive radiance and luminance to ourselves, to our work, and to all that we're doing.
And this is why the Grecian tradition that Hildegard so fully incarnates is about empowerment for everybody. And we all have to find the cosmic Christ inside us. Hildegard paints it, the man in sapphire blue in every one of us. I've always taught, and I've created programs of pedagogy to bring the mystic out of people. So I've always taught this, that we're all mystics, and we should get off the pedestal and get others off the pedestal.
Music was God's theology, God's technology to make us one with Him. You know, we all want to be part of that energy when we're singing. We want to sing with others. We want to be part of that uplifting that happens when we sing.
So every element, she saw every star, every planet, the whole universe is sort of united within this idea of rationality. That's what gave it its greenness, its fecundity. The word was pregnant throughout all of creation. And she saw her role as a teacher as preaching and teaching and imbuing that rationality within her sisters as she taught and expounded upon the scriptures in her homilies and in her writings and in her art and in her music.
And I think the other thing that resonates with us today is her boldness in speaking out to emperors, popes, people in power of all types, out of her moral conviction and from her moral teaching about what behavior furthers the good of all humankind and what behavior destroys it, destroys the universe, mars the history of salvation.
So all along the line, humans have to be alert. This is what being a warrior means. You have to be alert. Who's paying a paycheck? Who's profiting from it? Who's suffering from it? That are unjust because they rupture the web of creation, to use Hildegard's term. If you sold your soul for that, you're complicit in the evil. Creative people can be bought, as Jesus said it, you know. We sell our souls all the time.
But I think she can be a model for us of holding to what's true for us and not going off, you know, kind of half-cocked about thinking, well, what I think is right and no one else is wrong, but to really discern that and with other people, with resources, and then not to yield, not to give up their own conscience, not to give in to something that would really destroy their own sense of well-being and integrity.
There's no one idea that Hildegard puts forward that we can use as the describing factor of her entire corpus. That it's so complex and so original that you can't say that there's just this one scripture verse that completely describes what Hildegard is doing. She's vastly hard to put into a box. Unlike other doctors of the church like Aquinas, which distinguishes her in a way, is both a visionary and, more importantly for me, is an intellectual.
Returning to Barcelona after 30 years, where I had that first dark night of the soul, I'm reminded of how much I owed to that simple vow I took to be creative in all my work. The creative juices started to flow through my drawings and paintings, films, all of which eventually led to Hollywood. I now realize that there isn't just one place where creative magic can happen. It is everywhere and within each of us. It just needs that initial spark. As I discovered, Hildegard's spirit is still alive, ready to awaken us to our own unruly mystic. It may take courage, but the end result is no less than becoming closer to the Spirit of God within each of us. I wish to inspire you on your own divine path of creativity and spirituality, the ultimate awakening to your own unruly mystic. That is my intention in this moment.